Commissioner?
Yeah, I too would like to thank all of the public for coming out and sharing their time with us and their comments today, and all of those here as well. And actually, the question came to mind. It was triggered by a couple of the comments made, and I'm back again on page 6, which is the parcel map, which is up on the wall there. And so, with that additional information and the history of the property and so forth, do we have any idea as to when the current, which is, by the way, again, I'll clarify, it's 3.15, or excuse me, 15 or 18 acres of a 28-acre site. So it's only a segment of an entire parcel that is the commercial designation. Do we have any idea what decade that had been designated commercial? And again, I'm saying decade because we don't need an exact year. I'm just wondering, was it 2000 in the 2000s? Was it 1960? Was it 1930? So basically, do we have any idea what decade that?
I don't have information on when this was designated as commercial. I'm not sure if
It has been like that for a long time. So we're guessing the 80s. And usually what happens is when a parcel is a parcel's rezoned by itself, you file the parcel map. So you have a specific zoning for a specific parcel. So this was not done like that. So when staff and I and we all and several of the other planners, we were looking back through some historical documents, and everybody just kind of threw their heads up and went 80s. So because the jojoba farm. So that's about, the 70s, 80s, about all we can think of. So there's no date.
So that's just a guess then, is that correct? Okay, because again, with the sharing of the history of the site and so forth, and it's the identification of the electrification element use of the site that actually gave me a hint, which I could be wrong, that's why I'm asking the question, gave me a hint that it was probably designated commercial at the time that was proposed. I have no clue how long ago that would have been, but it could have been 5 decades ago. But if that is the case, if it actually came about simply as a result of that, that's what sort of answers the question as to why you'd have such an isolated, small commercially designated piece of property in an area that is nothing but rural living. And again, it's all speculation because it sounds like we don't know.
Just
Generally
on our zoning history, we had zones that allowed a lot of different things, and kind of to your point as far as the size of this parcel, and then in '89 with our development code and general plan update back then, that's when some of the existing designations came into place. And also, I don't have that information in front of me, but based on that there was an existing building of a commercial nature, that in that update, it would have likely have been designated at that time based on what was developed on the site.
And also, you're triggering my memory. Even if we go back even much further than that, we're talking history here. Is that prior to current day methods and manners in which the general plans and development codes are written, this county used to have what was known back in the 60s and earlier as zoning T standards. And again, those were applied to, in many cases, isolated locations out in the desert and elsewhere and so forth. But and again, I'm not going to say why and how that happened. In some cases, some of those were zoning designation related. Now, they weren't allowed to do that back then, but they did it. So again, this is all speculation on this part, but my only point here is that, okay, we have, what's existing is 3.1 acres commercial, and what's being requested is to expand that an additional 21 acres. And as was mentioned earlier, that is the question before us is land use matter. It's not really anything above and beyond that. So the question before the commission is whether or not it's appropriate to increase the commercial designation size in this specific area by an additional 21.22 acres. I will also share, and this just simply as an opinion, is that given the whole set of circumstances before us, I think one of the challenges of this site is public services. That's just my own opinion. I think that's one of the challenges of the site. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to lead to a question here. I think it's interesting that particularly in these areas, I live in Apple Valley, right? Particularly in these areas, we live in an interesting stress. And that stress is we're concerned about resources and we're concerned about opportunity, but we don't want change. And they're sort of tied together. After the last hearing, and again today, in fact, I know some of the people that were speaking from other times, but I feel like I know a whole bunch of them now, even better. And I really do believe that they're generally sincere, and I really do believe when they say, I'm not opposed to change or to growth, but, and then whatever it is. As a small aside, I would love to see them come out in support of something at some point. Because we generally don't see them unless there's something that they're opposed to, right? So we don't have affordable housing, and we don't have jobs, and we don't have opportunities, and I think in part it's because of sort of their reaction. Now, back to this issue of land use. Here's where I'm struggling, and I need your help. This is an anomaly of zoning that you found. And so the question is, do we really have a compatible land use to take that anomaly and magnify it quite a bit? We spend a lot of time talking about property rights and about what you can expect from zoning and what's in my neighborhood and transition, appropriate changes for traffic and resources and so on. I'm struggling with this inconsistent zoning making it bigger in this substantially rural area. That is not an indictment of the business plan or the concept or the fact that we need to expand out there. This location is, I'm just struggling with it. So help me understand the consistency of zoning when we go expand what was an anomaly. It wasn't really planned that way. Somebody said, hey, let's put a building out there and we're going to use it to electrify the neighborhood. So I'm not sure that is enough of a toehold, at least for me, to say this is a compatible use. It feels a little jarring compared to everything else that's there.
I'll answer first half of that, and then I'm sure the second half as well.
Okay.
There's on the same street, Amboy Road, about a mile down, there's another very large parcel of land for sale. It's about 22 or 40 acres, and it's all commercially zoned. And it's on the corner of Utah Trail and Amboy Road. So there are large commercial parcels.
Okay, so
nearby.
hold that thought. The people that are right around that know full well that it's zoned commercial. Has been for a long period of time. Here you have people that are around it who have had a rural designation and a pink building. Maybe an eyesore or a nuisance pink building, but a pink building, they seem to accept that. But the expectation is, for a long time, rural residential. So I don't disagree that there's commercial available. My concern is that's on a corner. This is a little bit different than that. Sorry.
No problem at all. And around that other site is also all residential. Mm-hmm. But maybe also.
Well, I'll just comment that, Mr. Chairman, I completely understand that discussion. What is the expectation when you move into an area and you think that this is what it's going to be like forever? And land use is a tricky subject. this area has transitioned for decades, but it's rural. Everybody knows it's rural. It's the back door to Vegas, the back door to Laughlin. You've got an airport to the south. You've got 29 Palms, a couple miles. You got a national. So, and that has changed the characteristic of this community over decades as well. Who would ever believe that 3.5 million people want to go to Joshua Tree every year? But they do. The site also was a farming site. It was a jojoba farm, so it had not this kind of use, but it had something other than a residential use, and farming uses are kind of unique and so forth. You go up the road a little bit. You're right. What is the expectation? And I think that's part of the reason that this group acquired such a large footprint is so that it could be protected, isolated, and not encroach onto people's lifestyle. And, you know, is a half a mile too close, or is a mile too close? I mean, I don't, you know, who's to be the one lady wants to shoot out her neighbor's light porch or porch light because
she didn't say that exactly.
You know, she did say
She
that.
said, "I'd like to know how to get rid of it."
Yeah.
You're the one that
Get rid of it.
injected.
Get rid of it.
She suggested shoot. Nah, I was listening. Right.
So you're right. You're right.
I don't disagree, and I don't think that necessarily carries the day. I'm merely saying, as a decision maker in this,
Yeah.
and bear in mind, we're not the end. No matter which way we go, you choose to go forward, you're going to go see the supervisors, and they'll take a recommendation from us.
But just to be brief again, I think we've indicated the reasons. The land use issue is squarely in your shoulders, but for the type of community that Joshua Tree, 29 Palms, Wonder Valley is, for the things that people want to experience, again, not necessarily downtown 29 Palms or downtown Joshua Tree, does this make sense for the investment of, you know, the acreage surrounding, the protection, the isolation from adjacent uses versus down the road? So,
And the issue of transition or separation
yeah,
is different when we're looking at high density, medium density, standard residential in a developed area. Out here where the spaces are so big and so interrupted, the scale is just different. And I don't have an answer for that, but the scale is just different. And so what is an appropriate buffer zone, and what does that look like? Building a
Right.
bigger wall doesn't really make any sense because that defeats the whole purpose. Yeah. And
correct.
And the community, I don't think, is of one mind either when we have impassioned people say, this is a beautiful place, you should come and see it, but I'm opposed to a project that lets people come and see it. There clearly is a tension there also. I'm not making fun, I'm just saying it's not clear cut. We struggle a little bit with it.
And then on the same street, just to finalize, on Amboy Road, there's as they mentioned, the Palms Restaurant is right down the street on the same road. And it's a large, commercial, restaurant.
It's a long road.
It is.
Okay.
So
All right,
in
I'm gonna
theory, the land, what you do have for the
I'm sorry,
land use though, is this is all RL5. So if they were not to if you were not to expand the commercial zone, then in theory they could provide a track map for I don't know how many homes.
30,
200.
30-ish, give or take a tad, yeah.
So, just
Yeah, no. And I think if we look at that and we say, you take 35 homes and you got 10 or 12 trips a day, and you begin to multiply water use, and I mean there are clearly broader zoning impacts that could be argued. The mitigation, I think, Julie, is the fact that those are not generally done on such a scale. We spot build out there that's as a developer, 5-acre parcels almost impossible to make pencil out unless you're building multi-million-dollar houses because of the infrastructure in between and building codes and so on. So I'm not arguing the point. I'm just saying one has a much greater headwind to actually come into being out there than this. this is a pretty grand scale, and so that's part of my struggle with the zoning is this is pretty ambitious. All right, I'm going to go back just to make sure we've not cleaned up. I'm about ready to pull this back to the Planning Commission. Do you have any cleanup questions? Commissioner Stoffel, any cleanup questions? Commissioner Stoffel?
No question. Again, just a comment based on the last comment is that, each proposal would stand into itself for evaluation and so forth. And as you mentioned, the distinction and difference between, say, urban, suburban, and rural, and scale and so forth, and I just want to highlight this point is that even residential proposal would have to stand the test of evaluation, and simply because a certain piece of property is designated a rural living designation by zoning, it still has to meet all requirements, including public services, all requirements, and so forth, and go through. So
Absolutely.
just simply because a property is designated, that doesn't mean it'll eventually be built for that purpose. Exactly. That was it. Thank you.
Very good. All right. Last word. Perfect. All right. Then I'm going to bring it back to the Planning Commission. I'm looking for either position statements or a motion, if you're ready to do that. For the record, we did not reject the last project. We just didn't vote. We couldn't find a motion, so I guess that was sort of the same, but it wasn't intentional. I would prefer not to do that here. Let's see if we can find a way to send this to the Board of Supervisors with a recommendation.
I just had, final thoughts that I want to make sure that everybody knows that we did hear them, and really appreciate that everyone who spoke up, and that I believe that this body has a responsibility to, hear everyone's voices and ultimately look at it as a land use decision. And my view is everything that I've heard and read that I'm not able to support it as it is. So
Is that a comment or a motion?
I would make a motion to not approve staff's recommendation.
All right. So if I can get a second, then we'll have some conversation about it if we so desire.
No, second.
All right. So I now have a motion and I have a second that we not support this change as recommended to the Board of Supervisors. Do we have discussion on this?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just, before the discussion, generally when the commission goes with a staff approval, there's findings packaged up with it, so we could just say approve and those findings go with it. So when we're going, if the commission goes the other way and directs denial, what we'd want to do is either provide some articulation with regards to why we're providing the denial, just sufficient enough to give the property owners some
I'm going to
due
take a swing
process
at
rights.
it. It is the maker of the motion. My take on that is the finding is the zoning is incompatible in size and in intensity to the zoning around it.
Yeah, and that alone could be sufficient if that's part of the motion, articulated as part of the motion on why there's a denial. Just wanted to bring that up. The list of findings are in the staff report, and that is, one of the components, whether or not the proposal is compatible and consistent with the policy plan. So that, I guess, scenario would go with that.
So you want to take that or tinker with it just a little bit as the maker of the motion, and then we'll see if we can get the second to support it?
So basically, that I would make a motion to not recommend the project or deny the project based on the land use designation and the scope of going from the small property to such a large property in the area. Does that make sense, or is that too broad?
Nope, that's...
But that
I just
satisfies
want to make sure
finding.
it satisfies your...
Yeah, that would satisfy enough, just for the record, to frame any sort of appeal to the extent there is appeal and to the extent, there
Right.
is a
So
action.
I've got an amended motion. The maker of the second, satisfied with that?
Yes.
Okay, so we're now sort of redirected, but back into discussion. From my standpoint, the issue of environmental is not a concern. There, we have incidental take permits, we have processing, there are all kinds of other hurdles that make us look pretty simple that you have yet to go. So I'm not as concerned about those things. This is a grand change between them, and I regrettably can't support this. Okay. Any other comments?
Well, can I ask a clarification relative to the request regarding the findings? I was panning down as you were asking me the question. Excuse me. Would it be appropriate then? It's the finding that says the proposed amendment will provide a reasonable and logical extension of existing land use pattern, wherever that language would be added in. It would be that particular finding. Is that what your intention was in your question? Which finding would it be?
Just give us a reason.
Yeah, articulating
Which we did.
the reason where it fits in to
Okay.
support the motion. And,
Right.
and again, public services go to public interest, health, safety, et cetera, things like that.
Exactly. And so I'm fine. We're fine with that. Yeah. Okay.
Commissioner Gregori?
Yeah, I just would like to say thank you to everyone who's been involved in this process. I want to thank you for being very candid, very clear, and also very upfront about the work you've done. I think some of these things might have been addressed if there was an EIR. So a part of that makes me feel apprehensive about supporting this project. I find the project itself very appealing. But I think that the land use concern of it is about the access to services, resources, and the multitude of concerns in this area make me not in favor of the project in this certain location for that fact. And so, but I did want to thank you for presenting something that is very appealing, looks like to bring value to this region. It's just, we have a multitude of challenges, and as you heard from the community, they have a lot of concerns about a project of this scale. So I think from a land use perspective, I'm not inclined to support this project at this time.
All right. So I'm going to, unless there's more discussion, I'm going to open this question up. The motion on the floor is to create finding of land use compatibility and to send this to the Board of Supervisors with a recommendation for denial.
No, if this is a recommendation item, so if the commission is not recommending approval, the matter dies here unless it's appealed by the applicant.
Oh, fair enough.
And again, just to kind of articulate more of when there's a motion to deny, that motion could be just deny, and that's fine. But then when as part of the commission discussion, there would have to be sufficient information to kind of support the decision, to kind of, again, help frame the appeal, or direction the staff to come back with findings based off of these reasons to do it.
Okay.
But there has been a lot of discussion with the commission right now on the reasons why they are
So metaphorically,
motion for denial.
metaphorically, we are a cul-de-sac.
Correct.
So essentially, it's only if it's appealed to the
Right. You'll have to do
supervisors do
something
you need
else
that added
to go
language.
beyond here.
And we've given you enough information for that added language.
Yep. Again, you could do a denial without having to request to prepare findings, or you could request staff to prepare findings,
Okay.
whichever the commission prefers.
But-
But there's been sufficient discussion where I think the applicant knows the reason why, there's been a motion for denial, but
Okay.
the commission, it's up to your purview on what you would like to do.
I'd take it the way it stands.
Yeah, if we would have had Woodward incur in here, I think it might have helped my decision. So I think in any process that expands itself, if that report could be included, I think it might provide more clarity to whatever that process was. Because they did the groundwater assessment, from my understanding, right? Yeah.
I think I missed your question.
Oh, it wasn't really a question. It was more of making a finding, or if something is being considered in the public record. That was something that I wish would have been considered.
Yeah, I think we have it. I think we have it clear that, again, if it were to be appealed to the Board of Supervisors, we could either give direction to staff to create the findings based on the information we supplied, or we can allow them just to go forward with this current motion. Correct?
No, so if it ends here and it's a denial, then the commission does not need to do any more involvement. If the applicant wanted to appeal, they could, and they'd provide the reasons for that appeal. And then when this is presented to the Board of Supervisors, part of that staff report would be an articulation of why the commission denied it, but is reviewed de novo regardless if it is appealed, so it would be a determination on its own.
Just want to clear, you are comfortable with the understanding and the direction?
Correct.
Yes,
A denial
ma'am. Thank
based
you.
off of land use compatibility. It sounds like public service was discussed.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Then I'm bringing you the question. So this is all in favor of the denial. Signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? This carries 4-1.